You probably think your company isn't really processing sensitive biometric data.
Right. I mean, most people don't.
Yeah, exactly. If you're sitting there listening to this, you might be thinking, well, we just sell software, or, we run a logistics company. We aren't some high security lab with retinal scanners.
Yeah. The classic misconception.
But if your company simply takes, like, a visitor's photograph at the front desk, or if you keep standard employee ID photos on file, well, congratulations, you are sitting on a highly regulated, massively sensitive biometric data mine.
Because it is no longer just about the physical photo itself.
Right.
Under these new frameworks, you are technically holding data from which facial biometrics can be automatically extracted, cataloged, and potentially misused. The mundane has suddenly become this high-level liability.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are focusing entirely on you. Whether you're an employee handing over your details, a consumer clicking accept, or, a business leader just trying to keep the corporate ship afloat.
Because the waters are definitely getting choppy.
Oh, absolutely. We are unpacking the reality of the DPDPA, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. And to understand it, we're diving into a really fascinating presentation by Navi. It's titled Beyond the Frontiers of DPDPA Emerging Challenges.
And what stands out immediately about this source material is that it totally sidesteps all that theoretical legal jargon.
Yeah, it's not a dry textbook at all.
Not at all. It actually operates as this practical and honestly somewhat alarming 10-point self-assessment. Basically, a structural stress test for an organization's data ecosystem.
Scored 0 to 10, right?
Exactly. Because historically, organizations have treated data protection as just, an IT issue, like a headache for the tech department to solve with a bigger firewall.
Just buy more software, yeah.
Right. But this framework forces the realization that data protection is now a fundamental operational risk. It requires absolute corporate self-awareness before the government even gets involved.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that idea of self-awareness brings us to the very first major hurdle. Before a company can protect data, it kind of has to look in the mirror and ask, who are we, really?
Which brings us to the first couple of questions in Navi's assessment.
Right. The source tackles this by demanding companies figure out if they are a significant data fiduciary or an SDF. And the way the statute is written, it feels like a deliberate trap.
Oh, it absolutely is a trap for the complacent. I mean, the text of the statute says the central government may notify companies if they are a significant data fiduciary based on things like the sheer volume of data, its sensitivity, or the potential impact on India's sovereignty, security, or public order.
Wait. The law says the government may notify you, not shall notify you.
Exactly.
That one word puts the entire burden of discovery on the business owner.
It changes everything. The source explicitly warns that waiting around for the government to officially tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, congratulations, you're an SDF, that's a recipe for disaster.
Because they might not tell you until you're already in trouble.
Right, the government might never send a letter until there is a massive breach. The company itself knows better than anyone the volume and sensitivity of the data it processes. You have to proactively self-assess.
Because if you wait for the official notification, you are already way too late to build the compliance infrastructure. Which, that brings us back to that terrifying front desk photograph realization.
Oh, yeah.
Are companies really processing this level of sensitive data without even realizing it?
They do it every single day. Think about the mechanics of a standard office building.
Okay.
Beyond the front desk photos, every organization processes employee health data for insurance purposes or, financial data for payroll, and many handle corporate social responsibility or CSR projects.
Let me stop you there, actually, because a CSR project sounds like a charity drive. How does planting trees or running a community health camp suddenly elevate a company's data risk profile?
Well, think about what actually happens at a community health camp.
You're collecting names, I guess.
More than that. You are gathering public health information, demographic data, maybe financial hardship indicators from thousands of vulnerable people. That sensitive data suddenly enters your corporate ecosystem.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, and if a company collects all of this without having meticulously structured policies to mitigate the risk to the data principal, meaning the actual human being that data belongs to, well, their own practices have elevated their status.
So you don't need a government letter?
No, you are already a significant data fiduciary by your own actions.
Okay, so once a company looks in the mirror and it has this terrifying realization that they're an SDF holding sensitive data just by existing, the immediate next conceptual hurdle is the technology itself.
How the data is being processed.
Right. Because everyone wants to be AI first right now. It sounds fantastic in a press release, but the source actually frames artificial intelligence as an unknown risk.
And this raises a really important question. It's one that corporate boards need to be losing sleep over, honestly.
Yep.
The source challenges this blind adoption of AI and introduces a critical, almost contradictory concept. It's called the explainability document.
Which honestly feels impossible.
Yeah.
Because if we think about how AI actually works, it is not just a linear math equation. I always think of it like baking a cake.
Okay, I like that.
You put in flour, sugar, and eggs, which is your data, and the AI bakes it into a final output. If someone asks you to explain exactly where a specific egg went, or ask you to extract that single egg back out of the baked cake, you just can't do it. It's a black box.
That is a perfect way to visualize the danger here. Neural networks and complex algorithms do not naturally lend themselves to explainability.
Right.
Yet under this framework, you must demand explainability from your algorithms and from the vendors supplying them. If a customer asks how a decision was made about their data, you can't just shrug and blame the black box.
So what happens when you inevitably can't explain it? Should companies just drop the AI first mantra entirely and adopt an AI only if absolutely required policy?
The source suggests exactly that kind of caution.
Really?
Yeah. If the risk is truly unknown and cannot be documented, the board of directors has to make a conscious, highly documented decision to just absorb that risk before adoption.
That sounds risky.
It is. Or, more realistically, they have to cover it with a specific AI risk insurance policy. You simply cannot blindly deploy an algorithm in complete ignorance when it hallucinates, shows bias, or misuses personal data.
And the plot thickens here because most companies aren't building their own AI from scratch. They're outsourcing it. They're using massive cloud operators or, giant HRMS platforms for payroll and talent management.
The third-party data processors.
Yeah, and the evaluation here is brutal, according to the presentation. Do we even have an inventory of all these third-party processors? Do we know their specific means of processing? Are they retaining our employees' data long after they actually needed it for that one specific task?
And crucially, you have to ask if those third-party processors are ready to step up and be classified as joint data fiduciaries.
Wait, meaning they share the legal liability with you?
Precisely that. Let's say your cloud provider decides to quietly use your company's legacy data to train their own next-generation AI models.
Which happens all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
And that goes far beyond the immediate contracted purpose you actually hired them for. Under this framework, you are both on the hook. You need to know your processor's internal mechanics intimately.
Okay, so we have this sprawling, inexplicable AI system and third-party vendors scattered absolutely everywhere. A system that Complex doesn't just run on autopilot. Who is legally on the hook to monitor this internally?
Right, that brings us to the human element. The personnel required to actually oversee this massive operational risk.
Which the source breaks down into two specific roles, right?
Yes, we are talking about two very distinct, highly specialized roles. The Internal Data Protection Officer, or DPO, and the External Independent Data Auditor, the IDA.
Here's where I really need you to help me out, because the source's take on the DPO completely threw me for a loop.
Oh, the part about the credentials.
Yes. It talks about their credentials, and obviously, knowing GDPR, the massive European data privacy law that everyone treats as the gold standard, or having ISO certifications, that's useful. But the source says it is not sufficient.
It goes even further than that.
Right. It suggests that a DPO's present GDPR orientation might actually act as a blinker or a blinder. Why on earth would knowing the world's most famous privacy law make you worse at your job?
I love this observation from the presentation because it is so counterintuitive at first glance.
Totally.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the logic is incredibly sound. GDPR is a fundamentally Western framework.
All right.
It relies heavily on concepts like legitimate interest, which gives companies a lot of leeway to process data if they can, just justify a business need.
Mm-hmm.
But the Indian DPDPA is a unique indigenous framework that relies much more heavily on explicit consent.
So it's like learning the rules of rugby and then trying to referee an American football game. You think you know what a foul is, you're watching the field intently, but you're blowing the whistle for the wrong things entirely.
That is exactly the blinder effect in action.
Wow.
A DPO who is entirely trained on GDPR might look at their company's practices, mentally tick all the familiar European compliance boxes, and falsely assure the board that they are completely safe. They become dangerously complacent.
So what's the alternative?
The source argues that your DPO really needs certification from an indigenous agency. It specifically mentions something equivalent to FDPPI, which is the Foundation of Data Protection Professionals in India.
Ah, okay.
Certifications for international standards like ISO 27001 are great for general information security, sure. But if your internal watchdog isn't fundamentally rooted in the local DPDPA ecosystem, you are leaving your flag totally exposed.
Wow. Okay, so you need a locally calibrated DPO inside the house, but then the source brings in the outside muscle, the independent data auditor, or IDA. And these aren't just standard financial auditors looking at spreadsheets, are they?
Not at all. They have to be capable of evaluating those complex AI algorithms we talked about earlier. And beyond just technical skill, they need structural independence. They have to be independent enough to report significant observations directly to the Data Protection Board, the DPB.
Which basically means they have to be willing to tell the federal government that the very company paying their massive auditing fee is doing something illegal?
Exactly. That requires immense professional integrity and a very specific regulatory structure to protect the auditor from retaliation.
And the clock is aggressively ticking on this. I noticed the source dropped some very specific deadlines that explain why waiting is just not an option.
Yes, the timelines are tight.
If you have to conduct a Data Protection Impact Assessment, a DPIA, you need an identified IDA before May 13th, 2027. And if you want to apply to the DPB to be a consent manager, you need an IDA to audit your eligibility even earlier, by November 13th, 2026.
And we have to look at why those specific timelines exist. The government is essentially sequencing the rollout.
Putting the cart before the horse in a good way.
Basically, they need the infrastructure, like these consent managers, audited and functional before the heaviest enforcement hammers drop. The reality is, this specific profession, the DPDPA-focused independent data auditor, is still in its infancy.
There probably aren't that many of them out there yet.
Right. It will take time to establish the professional standards and train the workforce. But as a data fiduciary, you do not have the luxury of waiting for the market to mature. You have to start identifying these partners immediately.
Let's assume a company actually manages this miracle. They hire the perfect, unblinkered DPO. They secure a brilliant, fearless IDA. What is the actual day-to-day heavy lifting they have to do?
Well, they have to manage the actual data itself,
Yeah.
which sounds like the most obvious statement in the world, but mechanically, it is a complete logistical nightmare.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit overwhelming. The day-to-day management requires dealing with the past, the present, and the individual. Let's start with the past, the legacy data. Reading this section, I can only compare it to, like, boxes of junk in your attic.
A very apt, if slightly terrifying, analogy.
Because you put these boxes up there 10, 15 years ago, you don't really know what's inside them anymore. You don't know if you gave a key to the attic to your neighbor, a third-party data processor.
Right.
But now the law comes in and says you have to pull down every single box, inventory, every single receipt and photo, and legally justify a legitimate use to keep holding it.
Or get fresh consent for it today.
Exactly. And if you can't do either of those things, you have to throw the whole box in the incinerator before that 2027 deadline.
And think about the sheer volume of those metaphorical boxes for even just a mid-sized corporation. We are talking about millions of emails, outdated marketing lists, resumes from candidates who applied a decade ago.
Records of employees who retired in the 90s.
Exactly. Do you know which server all of that lives on? Do you know the original legal basis for collecting it? If a company becomes obsessed with just trying to discover and classify all this legacy data, they will exhaust their resources before they ever apply actual security controls.
Which forces a massive strategic decision. Your consent strategy. Do you try to clean out the attic first, or do you focus on the front door to stop more junk from coming in?
The source heavily implies that operationally you have to focus on the prospective data first, the new information coming in today.
Stop the bleeding.
Yes. You stop the bleeding by using specialized software for data discovery, classification, and issuing new privacy notices. It also mentions the crucial need for accredited consent managers.
Let's pause on that term for a second. What mechanically is a consent manager in this context?
Think of it like a digital middleman or a unified dashboard for the consumer, similar to how an account aggregator works in the financial sector.
Okay.
A consent manager is a platform that allows an individual to see all the consent they have given across different companies and revoke it from one central place. Integrating with these platforms is going to be a massive technological hurdle for companies.
And it creates this sequential trap when it comes to rights management. Because, you might think the easiest first step is to just email a new updated privacy notice to all your current users. Hey, here are our new terms.
Right. But what's fascinating here is the strict operational sequence required. You absolutely cannot do that yet.
Why not?
The source demands that your system must be ready to handle data access requests, corrections, deletions, grievance redressal, and data nomination before you start issuing those privacy notices.
It's like having to completely plumb the house, test the water pressure, and check for leaks before you are legally allowed to invite people in.
Exactly. Because if you blast out 1 million privacy notices to your users on a Tuesday, and even 1% of them reply on Wednesday saying, great, I want a copy of all my data, or I want you to delete me from your system.
Or I want to nominate my spouse to manage my data if I pass away.
Yes. If you do not have the automated backend APIs built to retrieve that user's data from 15 different servers instantly, you are defaulting on their rights. You cannot ask for consent if you cannot mathematically honor the rights attached to that consent.
It is a massive sequence trap. Okay, so we've survived the identity crisis, we've wrangled the AI algorithm, we've hired the unblinkered DPO, and we've cleaned out the legacy data attic while plumbing the house. We're doing great. But then the pipes burst. We hit the worst case scenario, incident management.
This is where the real panic sets in for corporate leadership, I think.
Oh, for sure.
The source makes it abundantly clear that incident management under the DPDPA is a totally different animal than current information security management systems, or ISMS.
Because typically, under an ISMS mindset, when we think of a breach, we picture, a hacker in a dark room bypassing a firewall and stealing a database of passwords.
A cyber attack, essentially.
Right. But the legal definition here is so much broader than that.
It fundamentally rewrites the rules of engagement.
Yeah.
Under this framework, any unauthorized processing of personal data constitutes a breach.
Any unauthorized processing. So if a well-meaning marketing intern takes a list of email addresses that was explicitly collected only for customer support and just decides to use that list to send out a promotional newsletter,
That is unauthorized processing.
that is legally a breach.
Yes. No hacker required, no firewall broken. Your own internal operational failure just triggered a personal data breach incident.
And the reporting requirements for that intern's mistake are staggering. You don't just quietly delete the newsletter and scold the intern. You have to formally report it to the data principals whose data was misled.
And you have to report it to the Data Protection Board and to CERT in the National Cybersecurity Agency. You have to notify your sectoral regulators and your insurance company.
It becomes a multi-agency crisis in a matter of hours over a newsletter.
Over a newsletter.
And I want to zero in on one specific detail from the source that genuinely blew my mind regarding hidden traps in this incident management web. It explicitly mentions the Consumer Protection Act and something called dark patterns.
The intersection of data privacy and consumer rights is really where this law shows its teeth.
I need to make sure I'm understanding the mechanics of this correctly. A dark pattern is a sneaky website design, right? Like making the decline button incredibly tiny and gray, while the accept all button is massive, pulsing, and bright green.
Yeah.
They're tricking the user into clicking agree.
Yes, exactly.
Traditionally, that is just a shady marketing tactic, a consumer protection issue. But this source says that a dark pattern violation can trigger a DPDPA non-compliance breach.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a brilliant piece of regulatory logic.
Okay, walk me through it.
Follow the chain of events here. The law recognizes that consent obtained through manipulation of dark pattern is not valid consent. It is legally void. Therefore, if you process a user's data based on that manipulated consent, you are processing data without valid authorization. And as we just established, unauthorized processing is the literal definition of a data breach.
Wow. A UI designer's marketing trick suddenly becomes a multi-agency, reportable federal cybersecurity breach.
Exactly. The silos are completely gone.
Yeah.
And it does not stop there. What if you send an email containing personal data and the routing architecture briefly transfers that data through a server in a country not authorized by the Information Technology Act of 2000?
Even if it's just bouncing through a server for a millisecond.
That cross-border data transfer violation is unauthorized processing. It is a breach under DPDPA, violating specific sectoral guidelines from the RBI or SEBI. Also a breach.
And all of this sprawling liability lands squarely on one specific desk, which is the final terrifying point the source makes. The CFO, the chief financial officer, not the chief technology officer.
Because the law mandates that data vulnerability must be evaluated as a material financial risk.
Right.
Is the CFO really ready to report a dark pattern UI flaw or a legacy data retention issue as material financial risk in the company's annual report? Because if they gloss over it, they are essentially making a fraudulent financial report to shareholders and regulators.
Data privacy is now inextricably linked to corporate financial integrity.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean for you? If you're a business leader, an employee, or just someone trying to understand where their data goes, I want you to mentally tally your organization's score out of 10 based on Na'vi's framework.
It's a tough mirror to look into.
Did you realize you might be a significant data fiduciary just from your front desk logs? Have you evaluated how your cloud vendor trains their AI? Did you check your DPO's credentials to ensure they aren't blinded by European law? Have you built the plumbing for data rights before sending out privacy notices?
And are you prepared to report an intern's marketing mistake to a federal cybersecurity agency?
Very few organizations are sitting at a perfect score right now. True readiness requires proactive, sometimes painful, structural self-assessment before the reality of the law forces your hand.
It is a completely new operational reality.
It really is.
It leaves me with one final thought to ponder, actually. Building on what the source mentioned regarding AI risk insurance and the CFO's new financial reporting duties.
Oh, let's hear it.
We always assume the government, the Data Protection Board will be the ultimate enforcer of this law.
Right, the regulator.
But if data privacy violations are now categorized as material financial risks requiring specialized insurance policies and mandatory annual report disclosures, well, will the true enforcers of data privacy in the future actually be government regulators?
Who else would it be?
Or will it be insurance underwriters and Wall Street investors who simply refuse to fund, insure, or acquire companies with bad data habits?
Oh, wow. The market itself becomes the ultimate privacy cop.
Because an uninsurable company is a dead company.
That is a heavy thought to leave off on. The DPDPA is the ultimate stress test for the modern corporate structure. The weight is currently being applied. The invisible microfractures in your data ecosystem are forming. The only question is whether you will find them and fix them before the system collapses. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take a long, hard look at that readiness score.